My name is Nick Conti. I'm a senior director with Answer Advisory, part of the Accenture family now. If you heard that great debate on stage that my colleague John helped moderate, you've heard maybe a little bit about who we are, but just wanted to expand very quickly on that. We are infrastructure advisors focusing really on capital improvement projects in all market sectors, whether it's complicated rail, road projects or port projects, all the way to complex, technically difficult healthcare projects, data center projects, all the way through the all-important K through 12 and higher education. So I'm really honored and humbled to be here today. Just wanted to thank Ken and the rest of the team for putting on such a great event. Thank you to the Sheraton for such a great lunch. And thank you all who were here, who traveled here. I hope you can enjoy a little bit of the gloomy, perfect Pacific Northwest day, and really appreciate everyone being here. So today, this is the panel for challenges and solutions for Public Works Director in the Pacific Northwest. We're really going to explore some pretty critical issues today facing these esteemed leaders that we have here on the panel, discussing everything from organizational culture and community engagement to challenges and opportunities working with complex, cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams. And I've already taken too much time. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to the panel to introduce themselves. Maybe, Jen, we can start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Jen Sitatson. I'm the Director of Planning and Public Works for Pierce County, Washington. Our department is made up of about 850 employees, responsible for a pretty broad portfolio of systems and services. We plan, design, build, operate, and maintain the county's road system, bridges, stormwater, sewer, water, to some extent water, flood control. We also do building and land use permitting, environmental review and education, solid waste management. We have 2 airports and a ferry system, because why not? So it's I've been doing this job for about 3.5 years now. Geographically, we span from Mount Tahoma or Rainier National Park in the east all the way west across the Puget Sound, and including the Key Peninsula. So it's a huge area, very diverse geography, populations, 23 cities and towns inside. We are mostly responsible in the unincorporated area outside of the city limits, but some of our utilities do cross over and serve those cities. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Andrew.
My name is Andrew Lee. I'm the General Manager and CEO for Seattle Public Utilities. We are an organization of about 1,500 employees, and we service drinking water to the 1.5 million people in the greater King County area. We do drainage and wastewater services for the folks in Seattle, and then garbage services also for the folks in Seattle. Just a little bit, our vision statement as a utility is being community-centered, one water, and zero waste. And I like to share with people what that means to me. The community-centered aspect means we center everything we do on serving the people in our communities. And so if we're not having thriving communities, then we're not succeeding in our mission. The one water portion means that all water has value. So regardless of, most people think of drinking water, yes, that has value, but drainage and wastewater, let's just get rid of it. And we see that differently. We see drainage and wastewater as having value in our ecosystems and in our environment just as much as the drinking water. And then lastly, the zero waste portion simply means we're focused on eliminating waste going to the landfill through recycling, composting, and other forms of reuse.
Thank you, Buka.
Good afternoon, everybody. Bukta Gaiser. I use she, her pronoun, and I'm the Senior Director over the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the Port of Seattle. I've worked at the port for about 5.5 years. I came to the port to create the Office of Equity. The Port of Seattle is the first port in the country to establish Office of Equity, including airports or maritime ports. We are the first, and we support a lot of efforts to establish civil rights and equity issues in airports around the country. But at the Port of Seattle, our office, 5.5 years, of course, these 5.5 years have been very tumultuous for all of us. but especially for, airport and seaport. And over time, our scope of work as the Office of Equity is really expanded, but focusing primarily in the beginning on building anti-racist organization and policies, processes, systems, and building a culture of belonging. But over time, we now do a lot of external work as well and work with our commission office and our electeds directly on a lot of different projects that I hope we'll be talking about today.
Me too. Thank you. So Andrew, I'd like to start with you here. With an organization as large and as influential as SPU, could you maybe talk around some of the challenges that you face and also the importance of building an organizational culture to address some of those large challenges?
Yeah. I'd like to start off by saying as public works leaders, oftentimes, we get asked questions about strategy and tactics related to asset management, regulations, etc. But annually, I actually go to a wastewater and drinking water CEO forum with other, parallel leaders across the country. And about 50 to 60% of the time, we end up talking not about technical strategy, but we talk about culture. And I find this fascinating because culture, it's pervasive, obviously. It's in each of our organizations, and it affects everything that we do. And most of us who are in these organizations, we probably spend a good deal of time, developing facilities plans, long-term, infrastructure plans, whatever it may be. But one of my questions I always ask people is, how many of you have an organizational culture plan? And typically I will see a bunch of blank faces like, what is that? What does that mean? And it's very interesting because, one of the statements that I hear often is culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? You can have the most amazing technical plans, long-term strategy, some of the brightest people, but if your culture stinks, you probably won't be going very far. You probably won't be accomplishing enough because there will be backbiting, productivity will decrease, people aren't going to like being each other, your turnover will be high, all these things start to crumble. And so one of the things we've really emphasized at Seattle Public Utilities is we want to spend as much time in our executive team focusing on culture as we do on the business strategy portion. And so, for example, every year we define what are our top 3 to 5 culture improvement goals. We also actively solicit feedback from our organization on what we're trying to do. And the other thing that's really important is we try to set a vision for what is the culture we're trying to achieve. And you can imagine, without vision for what you're trying to achieve, people don't know what is the culture you're trying to build, right? And without any vision, things just kind of crumble. And so we're very deliberate about saying a culture of engagement is what we're trying to achieve in the utility. And I'll give a really quick example of this. A couple of years ago, we actually did something called the Big Idea. One of the cultural elements we're trying to promote is innovation and engagement. And so we asked all across our utility, what are ideas that you have that are going to advance our business overall? And so we solicited probably about 30 to 40 different ideas throughout the organization. What we got back was incredible. People had ideas about how to leverage technology. People had ideas about how to advance equity in our organization. They had ideas about pilots that they wanted to run. We ended up funding about 15 to 20 of these different ideas, and we're still seeing the benefits of those across training, across culture, across so many different aspects. And again, this just speaks to the fact that when we actually tap into the innovation, the skills, the knowledge of our employees, we can see absolutely amazing results. So just an example.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Bukta, I'd like to jump over to you here. So that Andrew did a great job of talking about the importance of internal communications, internal engagement, mobilizing that force. I'm wondering if you can share from the porch perspective, maybe the external, how you all work, what strategies you have to engage the community and make that information equitable and accessible.
Absolutely. So, I'm sure you all know that, because of our histories, because of so many tangible programs, policies, communities of color, low-income communities don't trust government, right? Everybody knows that. There's very low trust. Many, many times we've come to communities, made promises, engaged them, asked for their opinions, and then never got back to them. And actually the results looked very different than any input that they provided us with. So I think that starting from that level setting that there is low trust between communities and government, and that government is, historically proven that we will create policies that are often not in the best interest of our communities. So to change that takes a lot of, I think, partnership that is authentic, that is continuous, starts very early on, brings communities to the table, clarifying what promises can be made and where they can give input, where decisions have already been made and input cannot be given. So the things that probably sound so straightforward to all of us, about, of course, that's how relationships are. That's what trust looks like. But I think because we have failed communities so many times, or have gotten to communities like we work with communities in South King County around the airport who on any issue that we go to say, we have filled so many surveys, we have attended so many listening sessions, you've asked the same question repeatedly, you've heard me, show me what you did with what I've said before. So again, this sounds really straightforward to us, but I think it's really keeping in mind that the relationship has not been even. Of course, it's never going to be even because there is a huge power differential, but really entering that with some respect and understanding and really training. One of the things that we're doing at the port is training a lot more our people who are focused externally with all of these issues. And then, of course, some of the basics like language access. We do, for example, how to set up your business at the airport, which is an incredible opportunity. But how could you ever know how to? Where is that information? Who knows about that? The trainings that we set up, are the announcements in English only, or it's just confusing information. So there is so much that we can do that I think will bring to the community to the table in a more authentic manner.
Excellent. Thank you. So Jen, I'd like to jump to you here. You have a relatively unique position in terms of the marriage between planning and public works. And so want to get your perspective on how those integrate, what opportunities it brings, but also what challenges you and your team work to overcome between those two.
Yeah, thanks. This is the reason I took this job and moved across the country to Tacoma, Washington, was because of this opportunity to really leverage the combined expertise across all of these different programs and professions to make the very best investment and policy decisions we can. Our culture, we go by the name of PPW, Planning and Public Works, and we've been for the last 3.5 years building this one PPW culture to help everyone realize that every single thing we do is connected. So from, our very aspirational land use and urban planners who are visioning walkable communities with tree-lined streets, to our maintenance workers who actually go and clean up all of the leaf litter and manage the storm drains, we can make the connections and help evaluate all of the options. So I've been working really hard to create cross-functional teams, interdisciplinary teams for all of the major plans that the county has produced the last few years. One thing I'm really excited about is with our design standards and development regulations have long been lamented by the public works staff, inheriting infrastructure that is difficult to maintain or just not consistent across the county. So I created this code change tiger team with representation from all of our programs, from maintenance and operations to capital delivery teams to the planners, so that the folks who actually care for these systems for the next 25 years can have a say in how they're designed. From private development and public projects, we're adopting standards and regulations that create that life cycle view of things. And so this not only makes it easier for the folks in the field to inherit and care for this infrastructure, but it actually builds trust across the spectrum. Planning folks generally are working with private development, whereas the public works teams are generally doing projects in-house with public funds, right? So there's always a butting of heads and a kind of us versus them mentality that we are changing by being one organization and bringing folks together. So that's one way we're leveraging this combined organization is through our development regulations, permit review process, and then partnering with our public works folks. The other one on a much broader scale is our comprehensive plan effort, growth management, shoreline management, land use and transportation policies, all of this work being informed and driven by teams who know how to deliver a system and actually can invest resources in infrastructure, in multimodal transit options or transportation options. Previously, comprehensive plans were done by the planners with a lot of community input, but really not a lot of involvement from the public works teams. So these interdisciplinary teams, we've been meeting for the last 2 years, building all of the new policies from housing developments to parks and open space to our ferries and airports and roads, all working together and kind of battling out what is the Pierce County's future going to look like. And so not just an aspirational document that gets ignored by public works, but a combined solution that really understands the trade-offs.
Excellent. Thank you. And just building on those trade-offs, I think one thing that this question is really for the whole panel, but Andrew, maybe I'll start with you because I know we discussed it, is the importance and challenges of embedding equity in infrastructure projects and how you and your organizations are working to overcome that and ensure that equity is embedded or considered, at least in all of these projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I will start off with a statement about public works directors or leaders. We have the opportunity to strategically disrupt things that are going on like they've always gone. And if you think about it, anyone who's been in leadership knows the power of the status quo, right? It exists, and probably after you're gone, it will continue to exist, right? The status quo just is so powerful in organizations. And this is particularly true of things that are racist practices, of things that have been leading to inequities across the board. When I was at the city of Bellevue, it was fascinating because within our operations and maintenance group, we had about 90-some individuals in that group, and it was 97, 98% white male. Fascinating. And I don't think that was because anybody had a desire to keep it all white male. I don't think that was in anybody's agenda. But the reality was the status quo just persisted, right? Nobody was trying to disrupt anything there. And so we began to say, well, let's look at what's going on here. Where are people actually, where is this process leading to these disparate outcomes? And surprisingly, the applicant pool for positions in this division were very diverse, right? And yet, as you went through that process of resume screening, then, the working tests and then the interviews, it just led to less and less people of color, or even females as well. And eventually you ended up with a workforce that was 98% male. And we started to say, you know what, this is not, we're clearly have a barrier here in our hiring practices. And so we began training on internal bias. We began disrupting some of our conventional procedures in terms of how we did resume screening. We looked at our minimum quals as well. And within about 6 to 9 months, we looked at our result, and about 30% of our hires during that 6-month period were now people of color. Just like that, just by being intentional. And again, what did we do? We said, this is an area that clearly needs to be strategically disrupted. At Seattle Public Utilities, we faced the same thing, not just on internal facing things, but things like claims. For example, we've looked at our claims data, and lo and behold, where are claims coming from? They're coming from, generally speaking, affluent communities with less people of color. So what do we need to do to disrupt that process? We need to be going out to these communities of color that have more diversity in different languages and proactively reaching out to them about claims and filing the claims with us and providing assistance to that. This goes in a whole lot of other areas, but I think, again, one of our callings as public works directors or leaders within our utility is to be vigilant about identifying where are those disparities, look at the data, and then disrupt the practices that are leading to continuation of those disparities.
Thank you. Buka, from the port perspective?
Anybody here read last Sunday New York Times article in University of Michigan, and they're tackling equity? Anybody read that article? Please, one person, please look that up. It's an incredible article about the university's commitment to equity and what transpired. So look, equity today is not very popular again. If you don't know, 13 states in the U.S. have banned equity. How is that possible when there are government, entities that are offering equitable access? But today, there are 500 legislations against just trans communities' rights. So this is an intense backlash right now. There are multiple lawsuits facing governments, where, let's say, you have anti-racist trainings that are mandatory for employees, or the use of the word of white privilege or white supremacy. And so all of this is hugely under attack. Of course, those of us who've done civil rights work for decades and decades know that equity is not brand new. It's not just 6 years old. It didn't just happen because of the murder of George Floyd. It's been happening for a long time, but we were tired of not seeing results, and so there's been more pressure for accountability and results. But now the attack is happening again. So to me, there's now our reaction to that attack is to say, okay, well, let's call it belonging. Let's not say white privilege. Let's not say white supremacy. Let's say a culture of belonging for all of us. Regardless of how we talk about it, I think what we have to keep in our minds and at the heart of the work is that people, there are communities, there are individuals who've been structurally excluded from our systems for a long, long, long time. And for people to get back in takes structural changes. I'm really intentionally using the word structural here because I think you have to look at policy, history, and all of the decisions that all of our institutions have made to drive people away. And to bring people back in takes a lot of intentional changes. And so I think it's important to be mindful of this backlash, the intensity of the gains that were made in the last few years and the fight against it, and to keep that in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that. About 2 years ago, Pierce County implemented an equity index tool, mapping tool that brings about 15 different data sets. We are a very data-driven agency and government. So they created this tool and required every legislative proposal that goes to our county council has to have an equity assessment. And to be honest with you, from our capital program perspective and even many of our planning programs, our program managers, project managers are fairly uncomfortable managing their programs, assessing the equity impacts of their systems. So it's been a growing and sort of evolving effort to really understand what is expected of us. We've had projects in the pipeline for 10 years, and now we're doing an equity assessment in order to get our legislative body to pay for them, right? So it's not very effective in my mind. So what I've been doing, I created a new position, language access and equity coordinator, and I'm excited. We're doing interviews for it right now. We have some really great candidates that are going to help our program and project managers start to think about equity much earlier on in the process of prioritizing the needs, engaging with the community in a more meaningful way that's culturally sensitive. Because to be honest, the folks who design roads and sewer systems, that is not their area of expertise. So we're going to get them some help. And not just check the box, right? We have to actually think about the policy and investment decisions we're making and understand who is benefiting, who is being disadvantaged from it, and then change our priority lists, which is very difficult for folks who are driven to deliver projects, right? We don't want to slow down our timelines. We don't want to add cost. I'm an engineer. Cost, schedule, timelines. These are the things that we've been measured on for years, decades. And to now also ask folks to measure their program's success based on equity is a huge challenge. It's a cultural shift in the way we look at our things. So I absolutely agree. As leaders, it's our job to disrupt the status quo.
And we're all better for it. So appreciate all of your hard work in addressing these really historical, traditional challenges. So thank you for all that you do. We're coming up to the final 3 minutes here. So if we had to get a little crystal ball-y, and if you had to think of emerging trends or emerging challenges that you see within your organizations or with the industry as a whole, if you could identify that for all of us to take away and think on, if you have any proactive mitigation strategies for that too. I know we don't have a ton of time, but Andrew, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind is we're going through a little bit of a culture shift as to how we do planning. And what we're trying to embrace more so is a concept called scenario planning. And so the idea behind scenario planning is, the future is so volatile that you now need to plan not just for one future, but for, say, 5 or 10 potential futures, and come up with your alternatives and evaluate your alternatives based on each of those potential futures. And so this is changing the way, for example, we do water supply planning or do combined sewer overflow planning. We need to be planning again for multiple different futures. And so I'll just leave it at that. Again, something that I think any public works leader or public works organization should embrace going forward.
Thank you. Jen?
I certainly respect that. I'm retired from the military and have a background with DOD and critical infrastructure, and that's my entire life is scenario and branch planning. So I bring that to the local government mindset of usually when my team is presenting a proposal, my questions are always, and what if, and then what, and what if you don't get that, then what do we do? What are the alternate scenarios that we have to be thinking about? So combination of risk management, if we're in the utilities business, critical infrastructure and understanding our risks is everything. I'm focused right now on control system security. We have a sewer treatment plant that discharges 12 million gallons a day into the Puget Sound. I am very keenly aware of the risks of that operation on a 24/7 basis. So trying to balance that daily operational risk management with the long-term strategic planning is what keeps me up at night.
Thank you. We'll kind of round us off.
Yeah, at the Port of Seattle, we see equity, environmental sustainability, and safety as horizontal, cross-cutting kind of lines of business that impacts everything that our aviation, maritime, and economic development divisions do. So I think that training people every step of the way to infuse their work, for me, of course, on equity, but environmental sustainability is an incredibly important and impactful way to make sure that everyone is trained and that these processes are not disconnected dots, but that they're all one.
Thank you all very much, and a quick round of applause for our panel. Thank you, Nate.